often, and I say this to people a lot too, and it shocks them, but we talk about false reporting and we need to protect our men from being falsely accused. On a college campus, a man is statistically more likely to be sexually assaulted than they are to be falsely accused. And yet we're not talking about men being sexually assaulted. We're more worried about protecting them from being falsely accused when they probably won't be than we are from making sure that they have the resources and understanding necessary if they are being assaulted.
Hello, welcome to the F.E.E.L Podcast today. I'm your host, Melissa Crook. I've got a new friend here with me today from our good friends at Podmatch. I'm so lucky to be connected with them. I have met some of the most incredible women with just the most inspiring, resourceful, insightful stories. And I've got another one of those here with me today with Tracy DeTomsai. Tracy describes herself as transparent, honest, and trauma-informed. Tracy, welcome to the F.E.E.L Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. You've got I'm just excited to share your story and your resources. It's so, like all the topics we discuss on here, but such an important topic and that we're going to get into as we go along and unfold your story today. So let's kick it off with prioritizing self-care in your life, and what that looks like for you. You work in an area that has a lot of emotional work in it, and a lot of women's stories that are hard and trauma informed. And we'll get into what that is as we go through this discussion today. So I would imagine this has to be something that you really pay special attention to make sure you're taking care of yourself well. But as we know, we don't get the script when we're little girls that prioritizing our self-care should be something we do right away. We have to learn that and unlearn some unhealthy narratives around it. It's not selfish, but that's not necessarily what we were told. So talk to me about your journey with self-care.
Oof, it's been a long one, I think. I've been a social worker for almost 25 years and working in the field of trauma. And back in the day, it was like push through everything. And if you needed help, it was seen as a weakness or you weren't as good at your job or whatever. And the older I've gotten, the more I just don't believe that. I think that we know more. I think that the field has changed. I have also changed the older I've gotten to be like, I can't continue to do that because that's not helping me, but it's certainly not helping anybody I'm working with or my staff or anybody around me. And so it has definitely been a journey for a lot of the reasons that you said of like, I don't think as women, we are taught how to prioritize ourselves and it's give. And I think the number one thing I also kind of don't always like the term self-care.
Yeah.
Because I think that it's not always stuff that we have to do for ourselves. It's what we have to do for each other sometimes too, especially like in the context of like the workplace. I can tell my staff to do self-care all the time, but do I make time for that? And do I prioritize that as a part of work? Or do I expect them to do it, take a bubble bath and have a glass of wine at night? Right. And so I think the number one thing I do for self-care is therapy. Prioritizing my mental health is a huge, huge piece of that. And speaking of that, like I had therapy this morning and what did we talk about? Feeling selfish, feeling guilt, feeling like, how do you take care of other people? Because that is definitely something that I struggle with because I am in this field and I do really love to help people. But it's the metaphor of putting your own oxygen mask on before you put on somebody else's. And I really hold that to be true. I also, I also think that it's making time for fun. When like prioritizing joy and prioritizing fun, like sometimes it's like, well, I can't have fun because the world is burning down. But you have to have fun. And there, in the last few months, I have seen this kind of phrasing on TikTok and Instagram again of during the HIV crisis in the 80s, they talked about In the morning, we buried our friends, and in the afternoon, we protested, and then the evening, we danced. Because dancing was part of the revolution. Dancing was part of the resistance. And I think there's somebody else that's famously said that quote is dancing, joy is part of the resistance, or something that and it is somebody in the civil rights movement that I'm awful that
I feel like Audre Lorde or somebody like that said it.
And and I think that is really key, because so many points in my life, I was like, well, I just have to focus on this, and I cannot feel joy because there's so much awfulness in the world, but really prioritizing whatever makes you feel joy, whether that's going to stand-up comedy, whether that's going for a walk, taking that bubble bath, having that glass of wine, whatever it is, or not having that glass of wine. I don't want to promote substances all the time either, but use it for joy, not for
masking. Yeah. I think you brought up such a great point. It's interesting because we had this discussion on one of our women's panels a couple of weeks ago about the fact that we sometimes feel like guilty if we have joyful times or take time to have fun, and realizing that no, that's part of our health care. That's part of our self-care. It's part of filling our cup and keeping us going. And I've shared with this on a couple of different times already on this platform this year. I really struggled the first 3 months of the year in my normal habits not being enough. I was still feeling like up here with the anxiety I was experiencing. And I had to find additional ways to support myself and figure out what those were. And I figured out it was those things and spaces and being with people that brought me joy, that were fun, that were refreshing. And I just kept trying things until my husband and I, one weekend, we went and spent a weekend on the water with his sister and wife. And we went out and went whale watching and just were out and enjoyed all of the beauty of the nature and the joy, and laughing and enjoying good food and time and weekend with people we loved. And we, we're in the mountains on Memorial Day weekend. And then we got to be by the ocean this last weekend. And, just remembering those things that add to and allow you, I'm a huge Dodgers fan. So we went and watched the Dodgers when they hosted New York, and that brought me great joy. And, so not like realizing that's part of my health. That helps my serotonin levels, my dopamine levels, lowers my cortisol, settles my system to feel those things. So don't feel guilty about that. Know that that is an important component. And I love that resistance piece, because I think when we feel like we're fighting fires on all fronts, it's really easy to just feel like there's no time, but you're not going to have the energy to fight the fire. And the things and systems that you're fighting against they want to rob you of your joy. So don't let those systems do that. Don't give them that power. And so I think so I'm so glad you brought up the joy piece of that. I think it's such an important component in this work. All right. And that really goes nicely into taking care of our emotional health, our mental health, our physical health, our spiritual health. They're all pieces and parts of that. You mentioned therapy is part of your self-care. The joy piece, those feed our mental, emotional, physical, spiritual health pieces of it. And they're all connected. If we're not feeding all those pieces, it's going to show up problematic somewhere else within that. Talk to me about your journey with that. I would imagine for me, I experience things very somatically. And it's hard for me. I had to learn how to not, being someone for many years who felt obligated to be taking care of everyone and everything around me. I would take on other people's emotions, whatever was happening in the room, instead of being able to show up for it, but not embody it. I would imagine for what you do, that's got to be challenging. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, it can definitely be challenging. I'm not one to feel stuff in my body, which I think is helpful.
Sure.
I can hold it and put it somewhere else. But I am an empath. So I do feel what other people are feeling. And so I do feel sometimes that weight of the world because I see everybody's experiences. And I see a lot of that. And so it's really heavy to hold, but I also can put it aside and know it's not mine.
Yeah.
Again, I've gotten a lot better at that over the years because it just goes back into, I can hold that for people and I get to experience joy, even if they can't right now. You know, like I don't have to be tied to their trauma and their journey is their own. And I don't have to feel guilty if I'm feeling joy and they're experiencing trauma because we're not the same. Now, if I'm throwing it in their face, that's a whole different thing, but that's not the case. You know, just being able to experience joy does not, it's not going to help anybody else if I'm not experiencing joy, you know? And yeah, I think that like learning what's yours and learning what's not yours and creating those boundaries of how do you be there for somebody without enabling, without losing yourself, without doing too much. And that's challenging. And it takes a lot of self-reflection. It takes a lot of therapy. It takes a lot of training. I know because I work in gender-based violence, a lot of people come into this in a lot of different ways. I've been doing it for 25 years and you can watch the burnout happen. I've watched it throughout my career. I have felt it. And it's prioritizing those things that we've talked about in order to not feel it. Because when you first get into this, everybody's like, oh my goodness, did you know this, this, and this? I'm like, yeah, we've been doing that for 20 years. We've been saying that for 20 years. Great that you're finally catching on. Like, I'm not going to judge anybody whenever they like come into the, you know, come into the space. Like, absolutely. But it's probably been there before you started it. It was there before I started it. I am not the trailblazer. I am more of a microphone, you know, and I'm more of that, person to have the bullhorn that amplifies the message rather than being the trailblazer that figures out the message, you know?
Yeah.
And both are needed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You mentioned boundaries there. So let's talk about healthy boundaries. Talk to me about your journey with that and when you realize the importance of those for you.
Oh, it depends on what kind you're talking about, but there's so many. I remember when I was an intern and I was working at a nonprofit where my job was to help adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse. And my supervisor, and I was 22 years old. And my supervisor did a whole lesson for the interns about the difference between enabling and empowering. And it has stuck with me for 20 some years. And I still talk about that, of what's the difference? I cannot rescue people. Like rescuing is not helpful. It's not helpful for me. It's not helpful for them. I am not allowing them to experience what they need to experience and learn from it if I am rescuing and I am enabling people. And it is a challenge. It is such a challenge. It is probably like, again, it's one of the things I talked about in therapy this morning was how do you not enable people, especially when you are a helper and you want to do these things and people look to you to do these things.
Sure.
But those boundaries are so important. And it's really establishing what is best for me, asking myself that question. What is best for me? And then starting there. Yeah. And then realizing what are the different types of boundaries of like, is that one flexible or is that not flexible? When is it flexible? When is it not flexible? And learning how to establish boundaries of like, boundaries and requests are two different things. I can say, don't say that to me, but I can't control what you say to me. The boundary is, how do I respond to that? And do I keep you in my life or not?
Yeah.
And that's been a challenging lesson of I can't demand what other people do. It's only about how I react and what I accept and not accept. And part of that is just telling you I don't accept it isn't the end of the boundary.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to enforce that. And I'm so glad you talked about that difference between enabling and empowering, because so many times we think we're helping someone when we're enabling them, but we're not empowering them to utilize their own tools, utilize their own resources. And so many times I think when we continue to enable, we have to ask ourselves, this might be about me and what makes me feel in control or needed. That because enabling and codependency run hand in hand with each other. And so looking at those versus the empowering where you want them to feel resourced and able to take those steps on their own, that they get to a space where they don't require that input from you in the same way because they're able to move forward. And so I really think that's such an important distinction. And what a powerful thing, an important thing for you to learn as you were entering this space, man.
I will say I was taught it then. I don't know if I learned it then.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good distinction too. Yeah.
It took me a long time to fully learn it.
Yes. That another great distinction. Somebody can teach you something, but you can lead a horse to water. You can't make them drink. I mean,
exactly.
So you have to then upon yourself, like, okay, what's this going to look like for me in my life? Where am I going to have? And this is not just related to work. This is related to time you set aside for yourself in your calendar, relationships you engage with, what you say yes and no to. I mean, there's so many things that it encompasses.
I can't bring more to the table than somebody else, whether that is one of my staff, whether that's a significant other, whether that's a friend. If I'm working harder for the other person on the other person's goals, again, whether that's a client, a coworker, or a partner, I can't work harder than them.
Yeah.
Because you can't lead a horse to water. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So like that's the whole thing is like, and there's got to be a point where that's their choice. And you're taking away their choices by not doing that. Yeah. And you're taking away their own lessons by not doing it. And you're just prolonging that. And again, I can sound very wise. It doesn't mean I always follow that, right? It definitely doesn't mean that I always follow that. And I struggle with it a lot with like the guilt and the expectations and the like, but if I would have just done this, maybe they wouldn't have done that. Well, that's okay though.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That I can't want this more than you do. Like it's really got to be a personal decision. And again, agency and choices are such an important part of that, knowing what's our responsibility, versus their responsibility. I mean, there's such important distinctions. Thank you so much. So good. So many good things there. All right. How we can support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically. For me, this is really the crux of what you do, especially with Callisto. So I want you to speak to that, but I also want you to talk about getting to that point of your own journey with showing up unapologetically, which then for me, I really was like, we got to learn how to show up unapologetically for ourselves before we can really do it effectively in supporting others in that. And then what the choices we make out of that so many times become the resources that we end up offering and becoming for people. But it comes from that really personal place before we can really be effective with it on a broader scale. So talk to me about that unapologetic journey for you.
Yeah, I think the first part of really having an unapologetic journey is knowing who you are. Mm-hmm. And I think, again, that's a journey. Showing up unapologetically, I think, can be really misused by people. And I worked in gender-based violence, so I see how abusers can use that language of like, I'm just unapologetically myself. Well, you still need to learn how to apologize if you do bad behaviors, right? Yeah. And so I don't want to say that like, if my behavior is hurting somebody else and I'm living unapologetically, you have to know who you are and that you're coming from the right space, not only for yourself, but others around you. Yeah. And so that looks differently for what does it look like with your partner or your kids or somebody on the street or a coworker, like that can look a lot of different ways. But I think that not apologizing for taking up space, I think so often as women, we just apologize for taking up space and we don't need to. And I know years ago, I learned like that women say the word just as a way to apologize for taking up space. I just did this. I just wanted to check in. And so I have done a really conscious thing in the last 5 to 10 years, probably 10 years, to anytime I write an email or a text and I say I delete it. It is not always easy. And even though I've been doing it for a long time, I still am not in the habit of not doing it. Cause I almost been out. I just want to, like be accommodating. And there's a point to that, but there's also, I can show up with who I am, and that's a boundary. Yeah. And I don't have to apologize for my boundaries if they are protecting me. Mm-hmm. Now, if I also have to accept the responsibility of, if somebody else doesn't like my boundaries, they can leave too.
Yes.
Like they have a choice in who I am, and I don't have to apologize for them leaving because I'm going to be me. But I also have to accept that as a consequence, as a risk, as whatever you want to call that.
Yeah.
But it does require a lot of self-awareness and who you are as a person to really know how to be unapologetically yourself and how to change that too and evolve. Yeah. I am not the same person I was when I was 25, and I don't want to be that same person either. But I definitely care less about what people think, but not in a bad way. Like I don't need people's judgments. If I know I'm coming from the right place, and not everybody has to like me and not everybody has to agree with me. But if I'm wrong, I also am going to acknowledge that I'm wrong.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful balance of like, listen, not living in people pleasing mode, not trying to live out of someone else's expectations and satisfy those. And also I'm a learner, and we'll evolve and grow, and we'll learn and move forward and be like, I did the best I could do with what I knew then, but I know differently now. So I'm going to move forward with that. I think that's a great distinction. I want to go back to the apologizing piece, because working in gender-based violence, so many times those who have been abused, violated, hurt are afraid to come forward because of the lack of safe spaces that exist, because of the assaulting that happens so many times in the way they're treated, the questions they have to go through, things people are asking them, the gaslighting, just re-traumatizing over and over again. And it's like, wait a minute, why is this happening? And why are we doing this to these poor people? And so through this and how you've seen the impacts, you've created Callisto, and I want you to talk about you deciding to do that and let people know what it does, because I think this is a really important resource for those that have been impacted in this way to know about.
Yeah, at Callisto, we make this revolutionary technology. And so we were founded by Jess Ladd, who was a survivor of sexual assault on a college campus. Mm-hmm. And she wanted to solve it because reporting for her was, like you said, just as almost as traumatizing as the assault itself. Yeah. And so what we do now, is that we have built this technology, and it's end-to-end encrypted, which what that means is that it's encrypted before any of the information is stored on our servers. Mm-hmm. So it's very secure. And what we do is we help survivors find out if their perpetrator has harmed somebody else. Mm. So often when I've done this work, people say, well, I would have reported had I known that I wasn't the only one. If I could report with somebody else, I would report if it was to stop him from doing this again. And one assault is too many, right? But on college campuses, 90% of sexual assaults are committed by serial perpetrators who on average offend 6 times while in college. So if we can connect to survivors and accountability can happen after 2 assaults versus getting to that 6, we reduce college sexual assault by 59%. And so how we do that is that if a survivor wants to find out if their perpetrators harmed somebody else and they have a .edu email address, they have free access to our matching system. Okay. And our matching system, you go in there and you put in the state where the assault occurred. And that's because state laws vary on sexual assault. The definitions of sexual assault vary by state. And then you put in the unique identifier of your perpetrator. So the perpetrator's social media handles, email address, phone number, there's about 12 different categories, and you put in as many as you know. And that's what we match on. So in the background, our matching system is running all the time. And so if one person puts in an Instagram handle of their perpetrator and another person puts in that same Instagram handle, there's a match. They're not notified right away. It's not like a Tinder profile or a dating app where it's a match. What happens is that we're notified, but we can't just search through a database. It's the information about the survivor and the perpetrator still remain encrypted, even to us. We then assign that case to a confidential legal advocate who is free for the survivors. And that person reaches out to the survivor separately to say, there's been a match. Did you want to chat? The survivor has a choice to make then, because we put the survivors in control, and the survivor says, yes, I want to chat, or no, I don't. It's up to them. If they want to chat, they'll meet with that legal option counselor, who again is protected under confidentiality, and they'll say what happened to them and what questions they have and what are their options. What is a criminal option based on what happened? What's a civil option? What's a Title IX option? What's a mental health option? Whatever questions that the survivor wants to know, because most people don't understand our criminal justice or any of our justice systems at all. And so then once they get that information, and they feel that they want to know the other person and they want the other person to know them, the legal option counselor, that advocate will connect the survivors if there's consent to do so. So again, that's another choice that the survivor can make whenever they want to make. And then we put them in contact for them to pursue healing and justice, whatever that means for the survivor. We don't want to define it for them because we know that looks different for everybody. Some people are going to want restorative justice. Some people are going to want jail time. Some people are going to want nothing. And so we don't investigate the crime. We don't report to police, Title IX, HR, or any kind of authorities. We really leave that in the hands of survivors. What we're doing is to really connect those survivors, for them to know that they're not alone, for them to know what their options are, and for them to have a sense of camaraderie with somebody else who's experienced this by the same exact person. And then they get empowered to do whatever it is that they want to do. Because before Callisto, it's newspapers that are doing this. It's journalists. And so if you look at the Me Too movement, Harvey Weinstein happened because of journalists. Larry Nassar, who was the doctor for the USA Gymnastics, happened because of journalists and because one survivor decided to use her name, Rachel Denhollander. And that changed everything. And then they found hundreds of women and girls who'd been assaulted by him when there have been numerous reports, both by police or both to police, both to Title IX, and they were never connected or told that he had been reported in any other kind of way. But when they got collective and they had collective action, it changed, one, what they were willing to do, and two, how successful they were at it to get him behind bars.
That was a huge movement in showing what's possible when voices are brought together, and also exposed universities who are not taking action on these things and what's possible when you go down that road. So I think it's a really, what I love about what you do too is you give them their power back. You give them their choices back. And that's such a critical component when you've had this experience and when the systems traditionally that you report to don't. Like, it is so, we have just not gotten it right in our culture, in our society, in our systems. And this gives them a different experience and an ability to make choices for themselves and to know they're not alone. So I wanted to give time to that. I think this is so important. I myself work with groups on college campuses. I'm letting them know this exists because I think it's just such an important tool for, this is just so much more common than we talk about. And we talk about it and we hear about it, but it's like, no, this is real. And also just a reminder to the students, you gotta be careful. And also know that sometimes when you are careful, things still happen. So not blaming yourself, not, and not, that's what makes me so angry about the systems
Yeah. So often, when we talk about sexual assault prevention, we talk about how to cover your drink at a party, how not to go home with somebody, how not to get too drunk, what all these things. That's just reducing individual risk. It's not actually preventing sexual assault, because that perpetrator is just going to find somebody else.
Exactly.
And so the risk is still there. And the only person who is responsible for sexual assault is the perpetrator. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you drink too much, because I can get drunk at a party 100 times. I can get wasted at a party 100 times and not be assaulted. And one time that there is a perpetrator there that wants to assault me, they're going to. So it's not the drinking that's the problem. Yeah. Does it increase my risk? Maybe, but why? And it's because, perpetrators look for somebody to take advantage of. Exactly. We need to start putting that onus on the perpetrator. And we do that best by finding the serial perpetrators, because they're causing 90% of the assaults.
Wow.
And that is where it lies. And they have used the culture to manipulate survivors, to manipulate each other, to manipulate the system. And so, going back to what you said about just the system in general, whether it's colleges, whether it's any type of institution where you've got a power hierarchy, the systems don't work. And I say often about how we think the criminal justice system is like an episode of Law and Order SVU, where you've got really good cops, really good detectives fighting for you. They've got all the resources in the world. They've got somebody sitting behind there with a computer and 15 screens that all of the systems connect, and they can find perpetrators and who they did and all the things. That's not true. One, law enforcement's just not set up that way. And the best law enforcement agents don't have those resources at their hands, even if they want to solve their case. They're not trained in trauma-informed practices most of the time. And so a lot of the times you report to police and it doesn't matter. You're never going to, when we tell survivors to press charges, survivors can't press charges. Survivors can report an assault and the DA, the district attorney, decides whether or not to prosecute. Wow. That is not the decision of the survivor, whether or not they've reported. And so I think that there's such a misunderstanding of the justice system. And 99% of perpetrators get away with their crimes. 99%. And so it's not working. It's just, it's not working. And there's institutional betrayal at place. And again, going back to like being unapologetic, how does that change somebody's ability to be unapologetic?
Yeah.
When they're meant to if they disclose to a parent, all of a sudden the parents got feelings, and now I have to apologize for what my perpetrator did to me. And now I've got to apologize to my mom or dad for making them upset.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's this, like, you're constantly apologizing for what happened to you.
Yeah.
I have to apologize for what I wore. I have to apologize for how much I drank. And like, let's cut those lists out. Like, sure. And that will help reduce risk. It's not preventing sexual assault.
No, it's the perpetrators that, so it's going upstream. How do people get to the point where they decide that this is a decision they're going to make to do this to people? I mean, there's so many, what's happening to them when they're younger? What were they born into? What were they surrounded with? What was lacking? What happened to them? Because many times those that are abused become abusers. I mean, there's so many other layers to the story before they get to the people that they are hurting. And
I think that's one of the reasons that I really love about Callisto, because when I started my career as a social worker, I was a therapist for adolescent sex offenders. And so I heard the stories firsthand from the perpetrators for years. For about 5 years, I did that work. And granted, that's been a long time ago, and they were very manipulative, and they were also very charismatic, right? They got away with so much of it too. But accountability, like, yes, they had experienced trauma in their own right, which caused a lot of them to perpetrate. They still needed accountability to accept what they did was wrong, to understand what had happened to them was wrong, and to stop offending in the future. And people ask me a lot of times, why did I do that work? Well, if you can stop a perpetrator from reoffending, one that you've known has already reoffended, that's the best place to start, because you're going to prevent stuff before it even happens. Because so much of our prevention right now is how not to get assaulted, but you still assume assault is going to happen, or like how to protect yourself. Like self-defense isn't prevention.
Yeah.
It's
a reaction.
Because it's a reaction to actually being attempted to be assaulted. You know, it's still like prevention is preventing anything from happening. And the only person that can do that is the person that has the possibility to assault.
Wow. Such an interesting take. And I think also really helpful for you to have that information and understanding of how a lot of these minds work and where they're coming from. So you know how to address it on the other side. I think that's, so what made, and you and I talked about this, but I want you to share, what made you decide to step into this place where Callisto is? You've been, doing this work and social work for, over 20 years. What made you decide that this was a route you wanted to go down?
Callisto is the solution. It really is, in my opinion, again, having worked on both the survivor and the perpetrator side, and knowing that the numbers have not changed in the last 20 some years. And really thinking about how can we address this issue that both helps survivors and stops perpetrators and holds perpetrators accountable, which is the piece that we forget all the time. We're either doing either one or the other. We're not doing both. And I really think that if enough people know about Callisto, we will really have the power to really stop this and actually prevent it and change the numbers where, 1 in 4 females on college campuses are assaulted, 1 in 5 trans and non-binary students are assaulted, and 1 in 15 males are assaulted on college campuses. It's 2.5 million students every year are assaulted on college campuses. Wow. And we're not doing enough. The bystander intervention hasn't changed those stats in 20 years that I've been doing this work. And so I fully believe in this as a solution, because it's not a standalone solution. You can report and use it. You cannot report and use it. You can have a criminal case and use it. You cannot have a criminal case and use it. And I think that we can still just identify where that's at, where it's eventually, when we get enough data and we get enough research, we're going to be able to create policies that understands this.
Yeah. Yeah. Having that data, that's such a big part of policies. Like we've, telling stories and coupling that with data. Like you can't have just one or the other, because otherwise you don't get policies, you don't get systems to move. It's that combination of those things that really moves things. Thank you so much for sharing that. I want our listeners to have a really firm understanding of how intentional this is, and in the possibilities within it, and getting the word out about it, because it is way past time to move the numbers in the right direction on this. Yeah. And so, it's just, we shouldn't have to, there's so many ways that women have to think about their safety and have levels of fear all the time. Let's do something about this and eliminate, and not just, there are men that it happens to, but larger numbers are women in many of these cases. And let's give them another resource. And some of that, it's tricky because a lot of it's underreported across the board because of the lack of safety and all the stigmas that go with it. So having these encrypted, safe places they can go and know they're protected, whoever they are, is such an important piece.
And I think back to 2017 when Me Too went viral, because it started by Toronto Burke in 2006, but the hashtag went viral in 2017. And I remember people tagging me, and I'd been working in the field again for about 17 years at that point. So people were tagging me and saying like, did you see this? Did you see this? And I was like, yeah, but I don't get what the big deal is. So everybody's saying Me Too. Like, and if I looked at the people on my Facebook page, it was like, yeah, I know all of your stories. You've told me all of those. I was really confused for the first day or two. And then I realized, I'm in this field. I see all of this.
Yeah.
This is not new to me. I know all of the stories because I'm the person that said that's been told so many times, I've never said this out loud before, but this person assaulted me, that person assaulted me, I'm a survivor, whatever the case is. And I realize that especially when it comes to sexual violence, it's so secretive. You do not have to share. And there's such shame about sharing so many times because of the way that survivors are treated when they do disclose, whether or not they report. And that I realized that not everybody else saw it.
Yeah.
So that was a moment that everybody got to see what I had known for years and why I continued to do the work.
Yeah. They got us.
And so I'm trying to make
daily is.
Right. And so Callisto is trying to recreate it, the momentum after that of Weinstein being held accountable, Cosby being held accountable, all of these people, because the women started to talk or the survivors started to talk and accountability happened because we started to believe them. And I mean, the closing statements for the Weinstein retrial are today. And the reason that they had to retry it was because too many survivors spoke out. Too many survivors spoke out. And so, a lot of times this pattern evidence isn't allowed in the courtroom. It is what happened on this one case and this one event and this one assault versus seeing this pattern of behavior. And the pattern of behavior is going to show you the things that you're not going to see and the manipulation and the coercion and all of these other things where that might not be problematic in and of itself.
Right. But it allows you to see all the grooming
evidence. You see the intention behind it. You see the grooming behind it. You see all of that behind it. And that's really important. And if Callisto can create that by connecting survivors, then survivors can see that. And then again, eventually we can get policy change.
Yeah. Oh, so good. Thank you so much for taking that dive with me. But this is just too important to not share and let people know and give context behind. I really appreciate that. And this really goes nicely into the importance of setting and coming back to your why and your values and everything you do. This work is very intertwined with your why and the things you value and what motivates you and lights you up to get up every day. Talk to me about the evolution of understanding your why and your values and how that connects to how you show up in the world.
Yeah, I think, my why is because it's needed.
Yeah.
My why is because I guess it's a gift that I can take this really challenging, traumatic information and put it into ways that people can understand. I mean, the amount of people that I have talked to over the years of no, that's wrong. And I'm like, well, tell me more about why you think what I'm doing is wrong and why you're worried about false reporting and why you're worried about this. And being able to sit with people on both sides has just been a gift because that I didn't realize was a gift. So I think that's the part of the why is just like seeing all the people when I started doing this and I accidentally fell into an internship and I would tell people about what I was doing and then they would disclose to me. And I started really in my early 20s understanding how pervasive this was and I could do something about it. And I think that has always been the through line where before I wanted to rescue people and I wanted to help, kind of going back to our conversation earlier. And now I want to make change. I want to make lasting change, not for individuals. Of course, it's going to impact individuals, which is great, but lasting change where we don't have to experience it all. My number one goal in my career is to work myself out of a job.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to have to do this work.
Right.
But it's needed and I have the capacity to do it. And I'll continue to do it as long as it's needed.
Thank you. I want to ask something real quick. The underreporting thing that's always, or not the underreporting, sorry, the false reporting narrative that's out there. That's always been a narrative we've heard. I've heard a statistic, let me know if it's accurate or not, that 98% of the people that report being assaulted have been assaulted. Like, there's just such a small, minute number that are false reporting, but yet there's this whole, every time someone reports, That's the first thing that comes out of the accuser's mouth, the first defense they run to. And it's like, why aren't we talking more about the fact that like, no. 98% of the people that report are not making this up. That's the almost nobody is, false reporting.
Yeah. And I think that there's so many reasons about it that we do. So I'm glad that you asked this question, because I think that there's so many reasons that we really don't talk about. And the false reporting numbers are 2 to 8%, depending on the study that you look at. So as low as 2% of false reporting. So that's where that 98% comes in, as up to 8%, but it's still really, really minimal. However, I will say, when I worked with offenders, anytime they got accused, no, I didn't do it.
Yeah.
Not one offender acknowledges that they do it. So they're going to blame a lot of other things. Part of that is because they've justified it in their mind. They've used the culture to justify it. They have set their own, I'm a good guy, and they set the line where they want to set it, not where the standard should be. Right. Yeah. And I think that part of that is others allow them to justify it by victim blaming, by doing all of that. And perpetrators are charismatic. They're good people. They do really, really good things. And we have put this vision of what sexual assault is into our heads from the media that's not accurate. So most people, when they think about sexual assault or they think about rape, they're thinking about some really violent act where somebody's yelling and kicking and screaming and they are physically overpowered and have a weapon or whatever. That is not most sexual assaults. Most sexual assaults are coercion. It's the grooming process. It happens well before the assault happens. There is a trust built. This is why priests and clergies and everything can do what they have done. There is power and control over it. It can be slow. It can be really manipulative. And they use their presence of being a good person to convince not only you, but everybody else around you that what they're doing is okay. So that's why so many survivors take years to understand what happened to them with sexual assault, because it might not have been quote unquote violent. It was violating, but it wasn't physically aggressive in what we typically define as physically aggressive. And so a lot of times survivors are left like, that felt terrible. That left trauma. That left whatever. But that's not what I thought sexual assault was. And perpetrators use that too, because they're like, well, if I am not creeping out from behind a bush and attacking somebody and tearing their clothing off, then I'm not raping anybody either. This is just what we do. They use that manipulation
and tell themselves it was consent rather than a calculated setup over time to...
Larry Nassar said every time he got accused, it's a medical procedure. And he convinced everybody that it was a medical procedure, and it wasn't a medical procedure.
Yeah.
When Weinstein was more held accountable, he said, well, back in the day, it was just the culture that happened. That's just what we did. Because
doesn't make it right.
That's just what people did. Right? Like, because people supported him and he got away with it, but it doesn't make it right. And it doesn't make it any less traumatic for the survivor. If anything, it makes it more traumatic. And so because we know that we have survivors in our lives, I think we also really have to recognize the fact that we have perpetrators in our lives too. And the first thing that we do, if somebody that we know and love has been accused, whether we actually know them or not, maybe it's a favorite celebrity that is ours, is like, but that person seems like a good person. Of course they can't do that, because we have a dichotomy of you're either a good person or a bad person. Bad people are rapists. Good people are not rapists. And it's not. You can be both. Cosby
so much more nuanced.
So much more nuanced. And like Cosby did amazing things for people of color and Black folks in the entertainment industry. Yeah. So many amazing things. That is true. He also drugged and raped women. That is also true at the same time. And so you have to struggle with like, but I love the Cosby Show. I loved, I thought he was America's dad. Yes. And now you're wrong and you have to face that. And so it goes on to like being willing and able as individuals for us to relook at things, relook at people, celebrities, not celebrities, not judging like what you think, how you think you would act in that same situation. Oh, I would do this, I would do that. You know what? When your body goes into trauma, you don't know what you're going to do.
No.
You don't know if you're going to shut down, if you're going to freeze, if you're going to fight, or you're going to flee. But most of the time, you're not going to fight. Men might a little bit more because they have been socialized to do that. But even when they're assaulted, it still happens of freezing because they didn't know that what happened to them was assault.
Yeah.
And going back to the false reporting, so often, and I say this to people a lot too, and it shocks them, but we talk about false reporting and we need to protect our men from being falsely accused. On a college campus, a man is statistically more likely to be sexually assaulted than they are to be falsely accused. And yet we're not talking about men being sexually assaulted. We're more worried about protecting them from being falsely accused when they probably won't be than we are from making sure that they have the resources and understanding necessary if they are being assaulted.
Wow. That is wow. Yeah. Everybody sit with that for a minute, because that is a startling reality. But that just tells you what the cultural narrative has been around this discussion since time began.
If you want to help men understand that they can be victims and survivors too. Start there. If you really care about men, that's the conversation that you need to be having, and not, well, what about men? It's, you can advocate for men and you can advocate for women, but not only when people bring up women and say, well, what about men? Like that doesn't help either. You know, and it can be both. And there are different challenges of men being assaulted. There are different resources. There's different levels of shame. There's different levels of stigma. It's not, both can be, like, we have to hold two truths at the same time. Or multiple truths at the same time. And we as humans don't like doing that.
No.
It is not. We like to classify.
And moralize.
In really neat categories. And moralize.
Yeah. And we want it clean cut, no gray, no nuance. Yeah. We want it just to be, this is this way or it's that way. And we don't like dancing in between. Thank you so much for all of that. And this really kind of leans nicely into living out of your own expectations versus others. You are constantly having to let people know and communicate with people. No, I'm living out of my own expectations. I'm living out of my own values, my own why, not the things that make you more comfortable, not the way you wish the statistics were. And so not only true in your work, but also in your life and how you go about it. So talk to me about the expectations journey for you.
Oof. I think that, expectation is such an interesting word of what are the expectations in life, and what are the expectations in this work, and what are the expectations I have of myself. And like, when I was a young social worker, I thought my expectation was that I could help everybody. And I can't, and I won't. And I don't have that expectation for myself at all anymore, that there are people that don't want to be helped. And again, going back to the, like, I'm not going to do more for somebody. We can't help everybody. Callisto is not for everybody. It's not going to help everybody. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't help the people that do want that type of help. And I think the expectation for me is to do what I can, not to do everything.
I think that's so, because you have been gifted and you know what your value and your purpose is within this. And that's what is yours to do. There's other people that will do other things within that realm. That's theirs to do. It's so important, I think, to have that understanding, because you talked about it earlier. This is the kind of work that if you're not tending to yourself with those healthy, realistic expectations and boundaries and why and values and self-care and mental, emotional, physical health and the therapy and, all, the spaces and time in your calendar to take care of you and fill your cup, and that acceptance of not mine to fix, mine to resource and support, you're gonna end up. And I think that's why we see so many people in this world. And I think as you go into it, you have to really assess: am I built for this? Do I have the practices in place, or is there a different way I can show up here that can be supportive, that is in a lane that might lean more towards my strengths and where I do feel resourced and supported?
And I think for a lot of this, the expectation is it's a long marathon. It is not a sprint.
Yeah.
While I would like to work myself out of a job, the chances of sexual assault being done in my lifetime are pretty slim. And I'm realistic in that. And so it's like, but can I see the differences if I look back of like what the music looked like, what the media looked like 25 years ago when I started this? Can I see that we've made changes? Yes. When I started talking about toxic masculinity in 2010, what is that? And then it got to a point where there was backlash about talking about toxic masculinity, or, with Me Too, it's like, well, what are you doing? I've been doing the same thing, and I'm going to continue to do the same thing because this is going to go like this, and then it's going to drop down. And so it's going to be a roller coaster. And so I knew that Me Too was a peak, and I knew there would be backlash because that's what happens. And so, even when the election happened and we elected somebody that has been credibly accused of sexual abuse and has been indicted for that. I'm not using the right word, but basically convicted of sexual abuse. There was such a backlash. Be like, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I'm like, I'm going to do the same thing I've been doing because this is a marathon.
Yeah.
And if we can sprint a little bit, sure, let's sprint a little bit. But this is a blip. It's a terrible, terrible blip, and we are seeing a backlash, and we are seeing things change significantly, but we have to keep pushing forward. And so that's the expectation, and like the expectation is if we can do a little bit every day versus a lot all at once, you can make better progress sometimes in that.
Yeah.
Not always, but
yeah. Such a great outlook on that. And that's a topic that I get very fired up about, and that's for another day because I have very strong feelings
sure.
about the fact that we have elected someone who's violated women over and over again so horribly. But it also just is a reminder there's a lot more work to do in our culture and our society, and so we keep moving forward with that.
And you can see the progress. I mean, if you look at Anita Hill's sexual harassment trial, people blamed her. They didn't believe her. When you look at Christine Blasey Ford, and granted, it's the difference between believing a white woman versus believing a black woman, which black women have the least. Black victims have the lowest accountability rate in the criminal justice system, which is tragic and awful, and unfortunately not surprising. But if you look at that, though, people believe Christine Blasey Ford. They just didn't want to believe Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
They couldn't admit that he was an abuser or a rapist, but they would believe her. And so we've made certain progress, but what we haven't made progress on is understanding the dynamics of the perpetrator.
Yeah. Yeah. Because of that, it goes back to, that's a classic example. He didn't fit the mold that we have told ourselves based on movies and rhetoric that someone should fall into. And so, I mean, we saw the same thing a few years back with the Stanford swimmer who was accused of rape and did no time at all for it because he didn't.
I think he did 3 months.
Yeah, something like 3-6 months max. I mean, it wasn't much. And so it's like understanding what is actually true versus this stereotype that we have in our heads about it too. So much. So just education, learning, continuing to make sure the information you're working off of is actually true. And thinking about
acknowledging that maybe what you beliefs you held were hurtful.
Yeah.
And sitting with that and changing.
Yeah.
I've had to do that many times. Like there are things that I have done wrong throughout my career that I'm like, oh my goodness, I wish I knew that person that I said that to, because that was really, I bet I impacted them negatively.
Yeah.
And it's, you have to keep learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. And that goes nicely into accepting the layered aspects of ourselves.
Yes.
All those pieces and parts and nuances that decisions we've made, things we said, relationships we stayed in too long or that we didn't go into, jobs we did or didn't take, what things that happen to us that we feel, shame and fear and all these things around it. And the truth of the matter, and I learned this the hard way in my own life, is you can't leave these things unprocessed and stuffed. They will come out in a problematic, harmful way if we don't address them and learn how to acknowledge them, give them the space and room to breathe that they need, and doing it with curiosity rather than judgment. So you can have, and that's hard. Listen, it is not easy.
Yeah.
I've had my own journey. I am not the same person today in so many ways that I was 6, 7, 10, 15, 20 years ago. There are so many things that I would, knowing what I know now, would have done differently in those times. So learning to live with the regret from that, but also looking back at given where I was at the time, I did the best I could in that situation. And it also did harm. Both things are true, but I'm learning, I'm moving forward. I won't make that again. I'm owning my piece in it. And so learning how to do that with ourselves and also with the things that have happened to us that weren't our fault and coming to true, to the truth, regardless of how someone else responded or reacted to it, and being able to acknowledge and give that space to room and breathe and heal. So, and it's such an important part of our journey. And I have to imagine it's something that you yourself have to deal with in your own person, but also dealing with so many people that have all these unresolved layers as well.
I think, I heard this years ago, and I don't know who, but, and it's commonly said in our field, but it's not, what happened to you is not your responsibility. How you heal from it is. So if you sit in the trauma and you're refusing to get help and you're refusing to heal and you're refusing to move forward and you're refusing to do all of that, and then especially if that causes harm to others, including yourself, that is where the problem comes in. But you cannot control what somebody did to you, and it is not your responsibility. So if you're sexually assaulted, it is not your responsibility that you've been sexually assaulted, but it is your responsibility to heal from that for yourself and for those around you. Because then you're just going to react in potentially hurtful ways, again, to yourself and to others. And not saying that you're going to go on to sexually assault, but you might not emotionally be there for your children or for your partner or for your friends or whatever the case may be. And you're not bringing your full potential to the world. And it sucks that you have to do that. But we've all experienced something in our lives that has caused harm. And so it's all of our responsibilities to address that harm as much as we can. And it's an onion. You think that you have peeled the onion and you get to another layer, and then the next layer makes you cry. And you're like, I thought I've done this. Healing is not linear. It is not an A to B line. It is a jagged, swirly, twirly line that you have to go back and revisit things that you thought you were over, and then something else happens, and then you're like, oh, I didn't realize I had more to work on with that. I thought I was over that. And then there's feelings about thinking you were over that when you weren't, it's a process, and just giving yourself grace for the process, giving yourself an understanding, and then doing better.
That's all we can do. But it is important. It's not all, that is what we can do. I don't want to say all we can do, because it's important to take those steps and heal for yourself because you're worth it. And also so to enable you to show up as the person you want to show up as in the world, and showing up for your people the way you want to engage with them and you want them to feel from you. I mean, there's just so many pieces that go into it. When we're willing to do the work and go down that road, is so much there. Thank you so much for that. In summary, in living out F.E.E.L, finding empowerment, embracing layers, talk to me about the impact that has had on your relationship with yourself, as well as your relationship with other people.
Yeah. I mean, I think that all of that is so important, especially that embracing the layers, because those layers, it's the dichotomy. We think about the
Mhm.
dichotomy that I've talked about before, but really it's layers upon layers upon layers. And it's understanding that I have layers. In my professional life, I have layers. And in my personal life, I have layers. And in this work, there are layers. And I don't get all the layers right. And might not even know all of the layers. And
Mhm.
I think that is just really, really, really important to understand and to
Yeah.
keep in the forefronts of our mind and to be really, really intentional about it. Because again,
Yeah.
not everybody's going to like me. Not everybody's going to think that what I'm saying here today is insightful or is real or is whatever. And I can't control that. But what I can do is
Mhm.
show up authentically as I can with the knowledge that I have, making sure that I'm continually gaining knowledge about this topic and just about myself, and show up as authentically and true and honest and transparent and trauma informed as possible. And
Yeah.
that's why those really are the characteristics that describe me, because I think
Mhm.
about that in all ways that I show up and be
Yeah.
unapologetically me.
Mm. Yeah. So good. Thank you so much for that. All right. We are down to the rapid fire. Name 5 activities that nourish you.
Oh, 5 activities that nourish me. Okay. Going to comedy shows, live music,
Hmm.
sitting on the Michigan side of the shore of Lake Michigan,
Hmm.
um, traveling to any place I can travel to, and being surrounded by my friends.
So good. And 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
5 words on how I want to feel the next 6 months. Joyful, happy, resilient, empowered.
So good. Oh, Tracy, thank you so much for all of this today. This has been such a wealth of information, so important. Thank you so much for how you show up in the world and having the willingness and the urgency and the sense ability to do this hard work that's so necessary and so important for women, for people, for students, across men across the board. So thank you so much for that. Let people know, and this will all be on our resources page at embracinglayers.com as well, but let people know where they can find you and follow you.
Yeah, they can find us at projectcallisto.org. Callisto is Callisto. They can also find us on Instagram at Callisto. We also have a pretty heavy presence on LinkedIn. And if you want to connect with me, you can connect with me on LinkedIn as well.
Okay, great. Thank you again for your time today. Listeners, check out this information. Be really mindful about it and make sure that you have it and that you're sharing it with others. And then my challenge to you personally this week is when you are engaging with people that are talking about these difficult things that have happened, make sure you're coming into it listening. Make sure you're unpacking stereotypes and stigmas, being very thoughtful. And if you're someone where this has happened to you, know that there's a safe place for you to go and be heard and have choice and get your power back. So that is really my call to action on both sides this week. Tracy, thanks again so much for being with me. I appreciate you so very much and taking the time.
No, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, take good care. And we are so appreciative that you took the time to be with us today. We look forward to seeing you, or I guess not seeing you. Hopefully you're seeing us and hearing from us the next time that you'll take some time to join us here at the F.E.E.L Podcast. Take good care. Hello, and thank you so much for being with us today on this episode of the F.E.E.L Podcast. If you would like more information on how you can apply these talking points that I share with our guests in each episode to your own life, really utilize this F.E.E.L framework, go to embracinglayers.com, fill out our contact form, and let's set up a free 30-minute consultation to talk about how you can start living your most authentic, organic, healthy, feel-fueled life. Thanks again for being with us today. We'll be back to you soon with another episode here on the F.E.E.L Podcast.